The farmer who talked to stars. They said Rowan Hale had more conversations with the night than with people. Most evenings, after the last sheep was folded into the stone pen and the hearth went to embers, he climbed the ridge above the village and laid his ledger on a flat rock. He would tilt his head as if listening, then write. Small marks, numbers, little sketches of the sky. Wind combed the heather. Far below, the river braided moonlight through the fields. "Tell me then," he would murmur to the bright scatter over the moor. "What are you making of this year?" Rowan had his mother's old sky law and a patient mind that noticed needles of detail. He watched how Orion tipped earlier each night, how the Pleiades sank toward the west, how a ring around the moon meant ice crystals and wind on the way. He kept jars that measured rain, a stick in the yard for shadow lengths, a bladderskin barometer that swelled or sank with pressure. He wrote the first frog song, the last frost, the day swifts returned, cutting the air like ink strokes. He called it talking to the stars. It was really listening. The village kept its calendar by saints' days and habit. Seeds were always cast on St. Bridget's. Ploughs broke ground the same week every year because that was the way of fathers and their fathers before. That winter had been long and reluctant to quit. Nights stayed diamond clear and brittle. Stars bit like salt. From his ridge, Rowan watched the sky's glassy hard shine and felt the cold still pooled in the hollows. "Not yet," he wrote on his ledger's margin. Blackthorn winter still in its teeth. At the spring council, he stood hat in hands while the alderman mapped the usual chores. Rowan asked for the floor, voice soft but certain. "Delay the sowing 2 weeks," he said, "and I ask we dig a cistern before the bloom. The stars sit sharp. Clear nights will pull the heat from the soil and bite the shoots. Then once spring takes hold, watch for halos round the moon. They've been frequent. A long drought is setting." A murmur rolled through the hall. Someone laughed. "Since when do stars pour water into barrels?" The priest was kinder. "Rowan," he said, "the Lord gave us seasons. You'll make us late." Rowan swallowed, nodded once, and stepped back. He planted a small test plot on his own land later than the rest, and rigged reed mats on poles to pull down at dusk, a roof of darkness against frost. At the old quarry, he began to stone line a pit, sealing the seams with pitch, channeling the cottage gutters toward it. Children watched the strange work and brought him stray, flat rocks. "For the sky's well," he told them, and they liked the sound of that. The first week of April, the village fields shivered green, shoots like hopeful eyelashes. Then a night fell that had the sky polished to glass. Stars didn't twinkle. They burned steady. Too steady. Rowan pulled his reed mats down and did not sleep. At dawn, the village ground was white as breath. The new wheat lay black at the tips, as if the night had singed it. Women pressed palms to mouths. Men cursed without anger, because there was no one to blame. Rowan lifted his mats and found his soil cold, but his seed sleeping safe. Some came to his fence quietly that day. "You were right," they said, as if confessing. "What now?" "Resow," he answered, "and help me finish the cistern. The stars have their halo. High, thin clouds mean a change in wind. The ground will warm fast, but the rain will not stay." They worked, stone by stone, pitch sting in their noses. They made a dark mouth to hold clear days. Rowan strung linen between posts on the ridge, dew nets, and each morning before sunrise, when the air leaned past cool toward damp, he squeezed gathered water into pails. The children took this on like a game, racing to see whose cloth had the most stars of wet. May came like a door flung open, and the village rose to the work with a hopeful ache. Then the rain forgot its road. A week without. 2. The river thinned to a tired thread. By midsummer, wind from the south blew all day and never bothered to be a cloud. Fields dulled, leaves curled, cattle licked dry stones. The alderman, not a cruel man, climbed the ridge and found Rowan at his ledge, the ledger open like a bird on its back. "Is there more to be done?" he asked simply. Rowan pointed to the hedges. "Cut them only where we must. They keep the wind from drinking our moisture. Mulch the roots. Water at night when the plants open their mouths." He taught them the sign, a slit at the back of leaves, stomas, that breathed. He spoke of how plants read day length and hold or hurry growth by light, the quiet science of photoperiod. In the square, he showed mothers how to shade cucumbers with old skirts, how to lay straw like a second skin to keep the earth from losing what little it had. They drew from the sky's well only at dusk. The children's dew pails glittered. Not enough for waste, enough for life. Rowan moved from field to field with a garden fork and a listening ear. He put his palm to dirt, waited with it, then said, "Here, not yet, now." It would have looked like magic if it weren't so patient. By harvest, a thin but honest crop stood. Not fat, not a feast, but no one starved, and grain rattled in sacks like a promise kept. The river woke to itself. One evening a wind rose that smelled of stone and far rain, and an edge of storm stitched the horizon. People gathered along the ridge, and when the first drop hit, they cheered not for the weather, but for having met it with their wits intact. The alderman clasped Rowan's shoulder. "You saved us." Rowan shook his head. "We saved us. I only listened longer." They built him a bench on the ridge, a simple seat carved with small stars, and called it the listening place. In autumn, he taught the children the constellations with breadcrumbs on a black cloth: Orion the hunter, Cassiopeia the queen, the Pleiades like a flock. He showed them the bladder that rose and fell with storms, the shadow stick that marked the year. He let them write in the ledger their first frost, their first cricket, their first knowing that the world had patterns, and that courage was often just staying with them until they spoke. Some nights when the sky was a deep bowl and every star watched back, Rowan felt a quiet answer, not from heaven but from the old honest laws that hold rivers and roots and human minds. Change is predictable to those who pay attention. Difference becomes wisdom when it stays faithful and kind. They still teased him sometimes, Star Talker, though now the name was soft. He didn't mind. He would close his ledger, breathe the cold, and say to the highlights, "Thank you for your lesson." The wind moved in the heather like a rumor that had finally decided to be true. And below, in the valley that had learned to look up, the fields silvered, dew on straw. 1,000 tiny mirrors returning starlight to the ground. Remember, every story is only a beginning. Today's seeds of mindset will bloom into tomorrow's strength. Join us, subscribe, and let Mindset Stories rewire your mind one story